You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Billy Galanko, and today we have a very special and unique guest to the podcast. It is our first guest who is going to be talking about cork. We have Jochen Michalski on the podcast today. He is the founder and CEO of Cork Supply, which was founded back in 1981, and he has so much knowledge. It was so interesting to hear about how not only the cork industry, but how the wine industry as a whole has evolved over the past 40 plus years. What was really interesting to me is Jochen's background. You may not really know where that name comes from. I didn't at first. It turns out he was German and he was raised in Portugal, which Portugal is the home to the largest cork forests in the world, or at least the most well-known cork forests in the world. So it was a perfect place for him to get introduced to the world of corks. And he started his career there, did some early interning, and then actually went to California and established Cork Supply there and actually became a go-to source of cork in the United States, in California, before expanding to serve clients globally. I thought that was fascinating. He actually noted how the California winemakers were actually more open to what he was offering as long as the product was good compared to European winemakers who took a really, really long time to get to know their vendor and want to switch from what they were currently using and get to know and trust a younger person. So it was a really interesting kind of dynamic that I hadn't really thought of before. But throughout his career, he, like I said, experienced a lot of the ups and downs of cork. He talked about when TCA started becoming an issue with corks and about how his company really worked hard to do early testing and would test corks at many different stages during their production and be very, very detailed in how they were testing their corks and the suppliers that they were working with. And then over the years, how the different types of tests have advanced to the point where now they have their legacy cork, as Cork Supply calls it, which uses this X100 imaging technology, which is an AI and electromagnetic scanning technology that really helps detect not only TCA, but a lot of the other structural elements in cork to guarantee that each cork is of the utmost quality. And I know those sound like very scientific terms and very industry terms, but he really explains and breaks it down to how all of these work and why all of these different tests are important. And as we go through the podcast, you start to learn that there's a lot more to the corks than just are they clean and pure of TCA. There's a lot to do with the internal structure of the cork itself, the type of bottle and the length of cork that is going into that bottle have to be a good match as well. And there's just so much that I hadn't thought about. And then after this podcast, every time now that I pull a cork, I thought I was already kind of a little bit of a cork nerd because I just find cork really interesting, whether it be natural cork or conglomerate cork or synthetic cork and even screw caps. It's just so interesting to me, the oxygen transmission rate and how all of these different mediums control that. And Jochen really dives in and talks about the nuances of each type. His company makes almost every type of closure or has made over their career. So he's able to talk really intelligently about the pluses and minuses of each, where they're used now, and the perceptions around the market. I know this is a little different than a wine producer or a wine expert, but Jochen's knowledge is so great. It was amazing just to get decades and decades of knowledge shared with me in just a short amount of time. So I hope everybody really enjoys the podcast. I could have talked to him for much, much longer. I know I loved his enthusiasm and just continuing to wanting to learn. Like he is as excited about cork today as he was when he just started, and it was infectious to talk to him and really made me want to learn more about cork myself. So without further ado, I hope everybody enjoys this interview with Jochen Michalski, founder of Cork Supply. Hi, Jochen. Thanks so much for joining today.
It's a pleasure to be here. and hope it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And I hope it's beautiful wherever you are as well.
Yeah, I'm in Portugal, near Lisbon, a town called Cascais.
I've actually heard of that. Well, that's perfect for our conversation today. I'm really excited. I think people don't know enough or think enough about the closures of their wines. Can you share a little background on maybe who you are and how you got into your business, and then we'll dive into Cork Supply?
All right. I was born in Germany, in Bremen, and when I was 5 years old, I moved to Portugal. See, my mother remarried to a Danish-Portuguese citizen who happened to live in Portugal, and that's how I ended up, me and my brother, how we ended up in beautiful Portugal. So even though, as I always say, it's not nice when you have divorces and families, but having moved to Portugal, I think was a blessing. It's a beautiful country.
Yeah.
And I went to a German school here in Portugal. And after school, I didn't really know what to do or where to go. And my mother said, well, then go and work. So I did an internship at a small company in Lisbon, which was exporting wine corks. And I got interviewed and I took the job. I didn't, to be honest, when you're very young, cork doesn't sound very sexy as a job, but it involved a lot of traveling. The gentleman interviewed me, you're going to be traveling a lot. And I said, hey, traveling for free, I can't say no to that. So that's how I took the job and started learning a lot about business. And I knew really, I knew nothing. So I was a student learning all the bits of business. And thank God I had a great boss. It was actually fabulous. He let me make all the mistakes in the world, and I had to rectify myself. So there's no better way of learning. And I stayed with that company for about some 5 years and traveled quite a bit. Actually, I went to California, to Australia, to South Africa, and also some European countries. And then I wanted to set up my own business. I was 25 at the time. But I knew I didn't want to do it in Europe because Europe for me was old-fashioned. Nobody would give me credibility with 25 years of age. People would probably ask all kinds of questions irrelevant to Cork, to what I knew and what I wanted to sell. My job was in sales at the time. And so I decided, I want to start my own business. It's California, Australia, or South Africa. Because I thought people were more open-minded, a newer wine industry, no traditions. And thank God I picked California. It was in the early 80s, 1981. And California was just beginning, Napa and Sonoma and down the Central Coast. Things were just beginning. So it was a perfect time to start a business. And also America was known for the country of opportunities, and I can only confirm that. Because when I started, nobody asked me anything besides what I had to offer Cork. They listened to my story, and some liked it, some didn't, and those who liked it gave me an opportunity, and that would never happen in Europe. It would take you forever. It was really a wonderful experience, and I was just married, and I had a 5-month-old daughter, so it was a real adventure. Actually, I remember my friends or my mother at the time say, how can you let your son move so far away, just married with a little baby? He's totally irresponsible. So I knew. Thank God my mother didn't listen to that. She supported me all the way. If that's what you want, that's what you do. Off we went.
That's fantastic. And I think you also made the right choice in terms of country based on Australia moving so quickly to screw caps as well. I think you got the right course.
Which I didn't know at the time. I did not know that. As we go on in the interview, we'll talk about that. But I started in 81 and was importing cork from various suppliers in Portugal. And then you need to have a finishing plant. And finishing plant is where you print the corks with the name of the winery, and then it gets a surface treatment, and you package it. And due to logistics, anything outside of Europe, you need finishing plants in the location. So that's what I set up in California. And I was really fortunate Actually, one of my first visits, and I'll never forget that, was to a gentleman called Peter Stern. He was the winemaker of J. Law Winery at the time. And I went to J. Law because I set up in Hayward. I don't know if you know where Hayward is.
Yep, sure do.
It's actually not the perfect spot, but I ended up in Hayward. And so one of my first visits, when I had everything set up, I went there and he was nice enough to receive me. And so I told him, here I'm here to sell corks, and gave him a little story. And then he said, listen, you have half an hour. And I said, hey, I have all the time in the world, Peter. I have all the time in the world. Tell me a little bit what you really want to achieve. And I said, hey, listen, I have cork experience, so I know that's a valid contribution I can give to the industry. And I would like to work with the small and premium wineries in California, because I think they don't get the right service on cork, because most of the importers at the time, they were handling machinery, glass, labels, all kinds of products, and cork was one of them. And I felt that if I go as a person with knowledge in cork and just have one product to offer, I can add some value to these customers. And so he said, okay, now I know what you want. Let me make you a list of wineries which I think would be good targets for you. God, I was so thankful, because go back to 81, there was no internet, no nothing. That list would have taken me, I don't know, months, years or 2 years to figure out. So he made me a list of 80 accounts.
Wow.
So just to name some of them and some of them don't exist anymore. Most of them have been taken over by others, but companies like, at the time, starting Firestone, Etna Valley, Chalone, David Bruce, J. Law was on the list, Acacia, Buena Vista, Chateau St. Jean, Kenwood, Dry Creek, Sonoma-Cutrer, Simi, Joseph Phelps, Camus, Frog's Leap, Bedford Hill, and on. A list of 80. So that afternoon, I went back to my little office and I typed a letter to these 80 wineries introducing myself. And for 2 years, I chased these 80 wineries. That work he'd done for me was worth, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars probably. So I never forget my good old friend, Peter Stern, at the time. And then actually, he quite rapidly, or 2 years later, so he retired. And then another winemaker by the name of Barry Nico worked at J. Law for many, many years, and I built a great relationship with him. And so anyway, so J. Law became a great customer. And like I said, unfortunately, many of these wineries, the labels still exist, but they've been taken over by larger corporations. Some of them don't even exist anymore. But I remember my very first visit after J. Law, I went to Chalone down in Soledad, and they were pulling out vineyards in early 81. And I almost panicked. I said, Jesus, I'm starting a company and vineyards are being pulled out. That's not a good sign. But lo and behold, that didn't really affect me at all. And a lot of people gave me opportunities. And funny enough, I made a budget for the first year, pulled it on, and said, I'm going to sell 5 million corks. That was the number I came up with. And funny enough, at the end of the year, I sold like 5,100,000 corks, coincidentally. I never again made such a great budget for spot on. Anyway, but it was a great experience, and people give you support and they give you opportunities. I also learned very quickly, as you can get in, you can also lose a customer very quickly. Once in Europe, if you don't do things very well, you will get a slap on the shoulder and say, don't do that again. But it would take you forever to win a customer. The American experience was a great one for me. And thank God the business became successful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Before we get into how, I guess, cork as a closure and why it's great and some of the innovations you guys have done, how did you convince someone that you were able to have quality corks? Like, obviously you could have examples, but if you're just a new company, how can you say this will last you decades without examples?
I think I was able to transmit to the winemakers. Most of them were winemakers because they were smaller wineries, so talking to them directly. And they, I think, understood very quickly that I knew cork very well. because having worked in Portugal, having experience with numerous of different suppliers, so I was able to refer to, I spent 100% of my time dedicated to Cork. So I really dig into it deeply. I don't have anything else to sell or worry about. So I will live and die with this. So if I do a good job, I'm going to be here. If I don't, I'm going to disappear from the map very quickly. And I think they saw that. I understood. I explained them a little bit how Cork worked in Portugal and all that. And back then, there wasn't as much information available as today, as you can imagine. So I think I was able to impress them in a positive way of my knowledge. And that alone, I think, opened many, many doors. And then I delivered what I promised. And that helped me to grow the business. And back then, we got a lot of referrals too. I'll never forget one day I got a call, like in the second year, was from Chalk Hill Winery. I don't know if you remember that. The winemaker that called, and actually my wife was picking up the phone. She helped me there part-time. And the gentleman said to her, I hear you have the best corks in town. I never forget this till today. It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
So I rolled up there the very next day and sold him corks. But it was by referral, because he had heard from other wineries and experienced what I was doing. I think pretty much in a nutshell, that's how I worked my way into the business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that was also at a time period where the American wine industry was very much looking to Europe as a model after the Judgment of Paris and everything else. So you coming and being like, these are corks they use in Europe, they were probably like, awesome.
Yeah, probably though they didn't say it to me, but I wouldn't be surprised that they thought that in the background.
Interesting. Cool. Well, so fast forward, I think obviously Cork has been the primary or the best closure for many centuries for wine. And then towards the 80s, 90s, there was more concern about TCA and cork taint. How have you seen the market evolve and how have you adapted? Let's talk specifically about cork first, and then maybe we can talk about the other types of closures as well.
Okay. Actually, when I started in 81, this problem with cork taint, TCA, was pretty much the early stages. And when we used to buy corks back then, I'd go to Portugal and I look at the cork bag with 10,000 corks. That's what typically was in a cork bag when you buy them. And I looked at them visually, and then looked at the price and the service these companies were giving me, and made a decision and bought corks. That's how it was done. And then the TCA issues came up. At the beginning, people didn't even know it was TCA. It was just the wine turned flat. And like we always explain to people, I'm not in the business, it's like a wet newspaper, a little bit. It smells like a wet newspaper. And so I started telling my suppliers in Portugal, and remember back then there was no email, there was no nothing, it was letters and visits, occasional time. I flew over there 3 times a year. And I would explain to them, we have these issues. But they were selling corks, everything they were producing, they were pretty much selling. So nobody really took it serious, because it's an industry, an old industry, many generations, and they didn't really have the contacts with the wineries. Back then, when you were selling from Europe, you would sell to an importer, then the importer would sell to the wineries. So the manufacturer would have little knowledge of what really happens with the cork when you're at a winery. So they often took it, hey, you guys want discounts and I'm selling corks to everyone else. What are you telling me? And this became more and more apparent as cork taint. And in the new world wine markets, people were a lot more reactive than in the old world. And people wanted solutions faster. So I started setting up little vials and would do soap tests in California, like in 84. So put the corks in a little food jar, like a baby food jar, put a drop of water in there, seal it, and then the next day you smell it. And that humidity would help volatilize the TCA, and then you could literally smell the TCA. And so I set up a mini lab and started, and I detected. Then I hired a lab technician, good sensory capabilities, much better than mine. You really got to be trained for this and going to have a good nose. And we started finding more and more and more, and this became really But in Portugal, little happened. So I decided then to set up a lab in Portugal, which was unique at the time. And I hired a lady from Seagram's, which Seagram's at the time was big in the wine business. And they had wineries in Portugal too. So this lady had a lot of experience from the wine side and also from the cork side. And I didn't want a cork person to run the lab. I wanted somebody from the client side. So I was very fortunate that she accepted the job and she set up the lab in Portugal. And so we screened in Portugal all the shipments before we shipped to the US. Twofold. One, to reject bad batches. And secondly, also to invite the suppliers in. If there was an issue, they could come in and smell it. And the typical answer was, "Ooh, this doesn't smell very good. This is not my cork, right?" Unfortunately, it is. It is your cork. And there are things we can do to improve this. The first thing was like not using chlorine anymore. And then everyone thought if you don't use chlorine anymore, you got the problem solved. Actually, it went a lot deeper than that. I think we get into it later on in the conversation. But so that helped. But just to interject, in the late 80s, I also went to Australia, set up a company in South Africa. And the same problems I was facing in the States, I was facing in Australia and South Africa. And with the lab, it helped, but it didn't solve. So I decided in the mid-90s, I have to get involved in manufacturing if I really want to solve this and have cork and be in the cork business tomorrow. Because then synthetic corks showed up, screwcap showed up, and even ourselves, because I was back then I was an importer and distributor. Hey, I have a family to feed, and if the customers want other options, I have to deliver them. So I joined actually with a company on synthetic corks. But I still believed in corks, but it had to be done differently. So I bought a small manufacturer in Portugal, and was it who was supplying me at the time. They weren't great, but they weren't the worst either. So it was a safe bet. And then I put the lady who was running our lab in charge of this company. So to drive it from a quality perspective, and we started immediately investing in R&D and research and really get to the root cause of it. And I think at that moment, when we took on the synthetic corks, I think the major players in Portugal started to react and said, Jesus, a cork company in California is starting to sell synthetic corks. That's bad news. I think we got to do something. And I think that's when other companies in the industry also started to address the issues. But it was late, and to jump ahead a little bit, the Australians are even less patient. So in the early 2000s, they immediately went to screw caps, like New Zealand, like Catherine, you're from New Zealand. You probably remember those days. And Australia went pretty much 90% screw caps overnight. And so we had to work very hard to make cork a better closure, even though Australia is still a screw cap country like New Zealand. But some people are switching back to cork. But anyway, for me, the importance was in the US to save the business we had and not let the same thing happen as in Australia. And I think that was the turning point. And then it took a good 10 years for us and our major competitors to really find the first solutions to diminish the problem. And just a little thing for people who are not really familiar with it. But in today's terms, 1 ppt of TCA is enough to contaminate a wine. Just to put it in perspective, that's the same as 1 drop of water in 33 sized Olympic swimming pools.
Wow.
We're talking something very, very minute. And this TCA exists in other products like coffee, in fruits, on leather goods. But because there's no alcohol involved, it can be in higher PPTs and nobody smells it. But the alcohol extracts it and makes it really easy to detect. And it's a really hard thing to solve. So it took us, like I said, 10 years. We found the first solutions. And we still, in the last few years, had very small percentage of TCA. So it's gotten way better than it was. And I think just as of late, we really perfected it to, I'd say, 99.9%. There's nothing perfect in the world, even though people say, I don't know any product which is 100% perfect. If one, let me know. But we always go for zero tolerance. That's my goal in the company. And we're always investing in research and development heavily every year and make improvements every year. And besides taint, once that problem got solved, another issue came up, which was bottle variation. People were starting to talk. Hey, listen, okay, you guys got TCA under control. I detect a lot of variation from bottle to bottle. And it's the core. It can't be the wine, because wine is blended before it's bottled, so it's uniform. But we know that you can get oxidation or random more oxidation, not just from corks, but also on the bottling line. If you don't have your bottling line properly set up, there's a lot of things which can go wrong with the bottling line. But I can only deal with the part I can deal with cork. And just as of late, we solved that issue on natural corks. I'm saying natural corks because we have two types of corks. One is the natural corks for the premium wines, and then you have also a technical cork. You've probably seen that, which is grinded up pieces of cork, and then it's molded like a champagne cork, but also for wine. These are very popular these days. But on the natural cork, that's where the difficulty comes to extract the TCA, because if you're too aggressive in the treatment, you transform the cork, it turns into a mushroom, so you can't do that either. So we found ways of downsizing the problem. We have two processes with steam and ethanol, and it gets treated twice in that system, and that really minimizes TCA almost completely. And then we have a system where we screen individually the corks. Let's say you're a high-end winery, you buy 10,000 corks. We then take each individual cork and screen one by one individually for TCA. We can do two ways. We started doing it by soaking. We set up a special division or factory in Portugal where we have trained panelists. And they would also put the cork in a jar, top of water, seal it, and smell it the next day. And we have 3 panelists. If the first one accepts it, that the cork is good, we have a second one, and we have a third one. And all 3 have to approve for the cork to be approved. The benefit of that is you detect TCA, and you can also detect other aromas which could be not desirable in wine. So through that sensory analysis, you can eliminate those 2. Obviously, your nose has a limitation, and there can be human failures. And so we also developed a technology which would, instead of us smelling the corks, we would use, like we use in the labs. I don't know if you're familiar with gas chromatography. So in our lab, we analyze the corks with the gas chromatography, and it tells us exactly the amount of TCA, cork by cork. But it's destructive, but it's a quality control tool. Now we developed a machine where we can screen the corks one by one. We heat the cork up, basically, volatilize the TCA, and then have a track, and then have a sort of a GCMF who quantifies the TCA level, and then it accepts or rejects. And we do that in an industrial way. And that was, you couldn't buy the equipment off the shelf. Nobody produced it. And we're a small industry. So today I always say, we don't only produce corks, we produce technology as well. So we have kind of 2 businesses. And so we developed this machine, and it's worked very well for us. And some customers still prefer us to do this, the human sensory, eliminate the other aromas. Some say, no, I want you to focus 100% on TCA, and I trust the machine more. And so we do the machine screening. So we have both options. But besides that, just to go back, and I lost track here, I'm sorry. But then came the problem of bottle variation. We solved that in corks now as well. So we have a electromagnetic imaging of the cork. And we found out there's a feature in cork, which you can see with your visible eye, which can contribute to excessive oxidation of a cork. So what we did, and then also with artificial intelligence, we're able to speed up the process. So now we can, when we film the cork, we categorize it immediately into, okay, this is a viable cork, and it allows the normal amount of oxygen to go through the cork to help the wine to develop. And then those which let excessive oxygen go through, they get eliminated. So we can now tell the winemaker, hey, we have a natural cork which avoids the bottle-to-bottle variation, and we've solved the sensory issue. So we have the perfect natural cork this day and age.
Wow. So for the oxygen transmission, is that just down to like pore size or uneven density?
No.
What?
It's not, people always believe that's density. Well, we've done research on it. It has nothing to do with density, unless it's a huge outside layer of density. But for that, we screen anyway. We have for years. But any cork within a certain density parameter, density has zero influence, absolutely zero. We found that out. And actually and what does it is this feature in the cork, and you can't see it with your naked eye. So it's not what we call we call something like a wormhole in cork you can have, and then actually the wine can leak through that wormhole, or you can have a dry year in cork, which also creates seepage and oxygen can slip through. But there's nothing to do with that. It's a feature. You cut the cork open, you just cut it, and you can't see it. You can only through this filming internally we can see it. So it's, like I said, with nothing to do with density. This is just a very late discovery. And actually, we validate this we work with a lab in Spain, which works on oxygenation in wine. And we've done now numerous tests over the last 3 years since we launched this product. Every cork we mark internally as a failure, they confirm it. And all the ones we mark as viable, good corks, they confirm that as well, without exception. So the system is really, I think I can use the term bulletproof. Obviously, you can have technical issues. Something can go wrong with the machine. That's a different issue. But if the machine is properly set up and proper maintenance, it works to perfection.
That's fascinating. So it is a structural component okay, interesting. Wow. And then for our listeners, this cork in particular, is this your legacy cork? Is that what this particular one is called?
It's called legacy because the legacy is threefold. It includes this technology I was just describing. We call it X100. And then we also screen the corks for TCA or for aromas, and we screen them twice. We do the sensory by human panelists, and we do the machine screening. So we absolutely guarantee that there's no taint and no off aromas and no oxygen variation. So that's our legacy cork. We launched that 2 years ago. Actually, we launched it. The first market we launched it happened to actually California. Was last year in January at the trade show in Sacramento.
Very cool. So can you? I hadn't heard of that before. That's fascinating. I have so many questions that would probably bore our users. So or my listeners. So I won't go down the MW rabbit hole. But so in the grand scheme of things, I think you referenced this before. Like I've heard, I worked at Vintage in Australia 7 years ago, and even then people were considering going back to cork for premium closures, and there's other composite corks that people have been using. How do you see the closure like environment right now? Is there more of a movement back to traditional cork as your technology has gotten better, or is there still a really disparate market here?
Well, quite a bit. When I started, everything was natural cork, 100%. Natural cork, the one piece. For premium wines, it was used for premium wines, for less premium wines, for low-priced wines. Because when you produce cork, you produce different quality levels. It's a natural product. And we would literally sell all these corks in these different categories. There were customers for everything. And then as these TCA problems started and got more of a bigger concern, I said people went to synthetic corks to some extent, then later on to screw caps. And then also a new cork was developed, which we call the technical cork, which is when you produce the natural corks, you have a lot of cork left, which you then grind up. You make a champagne cork, and you can make a wine cork too. And there was a company in France who actually launched them very well at the beginning with a total TCA-free guarantee. So people jumped on that right away. If you wanted to stay in Cork, you didn't go to synthetics, you didn't go to screw caps, so you went to a technical cork. And we later on started producing technical corks ourselves, also with a total TCA-free guarantee. And it's much easier to produce and eliminate TCA because you grind up the cork. So you have the TCA pretty much sitting on a granule. And then there's different methods of cleaning it, but it's much easier to remove the TCA from that cork than from a natural cork. These corks are also more price appealing. And as wines got more competitive around the world and business got more competitive, many people switched their medium grade corks and their lower grade corks to technical corks, showing them a better performance because it's an industrial product. So you get more uniformity with the technical cork than a natural, especially at the medium and lower end. And some people used it also for the premium wines because they were fed up with corks and they didn't want to go screw caps. And honestly, personally, I don't think it's a good closure for long aging wines. I think it's a good closure for short to medium consumption wines. Because I think cork has proven itself, it seals bottles for 30 years or more if they're properly stored. And now that we've solved the problems, the bottle variation, the TCA, people say technical corks can last 30 years. I haven't seen it. I think nobody has seen it. But I've already heard of people when the cork stays in too long, the wine actually doesn't evolve exactly like the winemaker wants, like it does with a natural cork. And so we recommend them for short to medium-term wines, and otherwise use a natural cork. So today, natural corks are used actually in the premium wines. Then you have technical corks, some in premium wines, and the rest for the middle-tier wines and also lower-priced wines. And then you have screw caps and synthetics. Even though synthetics took off in the 90s very strongly, but I think for the last 5 years and less, it really reduced a lot. The volume of synthetic corks is reduced dramatically. If you look in the US, you hardly see them anymore. In Europe, you still see them in some markets, but also to a lesser extent. And in Argentina, still. But Australia actually was never a big fan of synthetic corks. They used synthetic corks for export wines, where customers didn't want to see a bottle with a screw cap. But talking about natural corks in Australia, we just got the word a few months ago that Grange of Penfolds is now back to natural corks. The whole Penfold line is actually back to natural corks.
Oh, wow.
Quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a testament. I've heard too, it's interesting as you referenced, we're getting to that point where some of these technical corks have been able to be tested for 20, 30 years and people are comparing them and they really are just seeing the natural cork. There's something about that working well. I wanted to ask about something that is widely talked about in wine for the grape growing, but in terms of the climate changing around the world and also just development in certain countries, are you seeing an impact to the traditional cork forests being impacted negatively, positively by any of these developments?
Actually, I think there's two reasons we are being affected too. One is the cork forests are getting older, and so the yields aren't the same as when you have a younger, more energetic trees, and also you have lesser yields and lesser high-quality corkwood. So it's been diminishing, which is a concern. And I'm sure climate change is also playing a role here. So there have been a lot of studies done on planting cork trees now, just like vineyards and olive trees with irrigation. Just to let you know, cork trees, usually you have 70 trees per hectare. On these new plantations, you have 600 trees per hectare. And some of them will die because they won't make it. So let's say at the end, you end up with 400 trees, which is quite impressive compared to. And what the experiments have shown is you irrigate these trees, so you grow the tree much faster than before. In a traditional tree, you harvest for the first harvest after 25 years, and then every 9 years. And you only get a natural cork after the third harvest. So it's after 43 years. And then the tree will live for 200 years. So with these new plantations, you get a first harvest in 7 to 8 years. You can still make a cork. And then after 5 years, you have another harvest. So what take you 43 years now takes you, say, 12 or 13 years, and you can make a cork. But what we found out is actually the density is not quite right because the cork has grown too fast. So the latest experiments are irrigate the cork the first 7, 8 years, harvest them, and then take the irrigation away and just irrigate in a very dry year. Because sometimes when you look at the cork, you can see when there's a dry year, which is not good. So if we irrigate, give the tree a little bit of water, we can avoid that. So it's a big plus. So let's say you harvest in 9 years again, and not at 5, like the first experiment, but you will get much better density and probably the same density as a non-irrigated tree. So there's quite a few plantations now being planted, and we know there's more and more people looking at it. So that's going to be a good benefit to us in the industry to have enough cork for the future. Just if everyone would want to have cork, let's say no screw caps, no synthetics, we wouldn't have enough cork to be quite honest, to seal all the bottles, to be quite honest. So there has to be other closures as well. We just need to know where cork should be and what the sector for screw caps is, and for synthetics or whatever closure comes tomorrow. Who knows what else will be developed. But for cork, I think you can definitely say there's an increased demand, especially on the technical corks. We've seen that grow a lot. And I think it has to do because the wineries have seen, we put it in plain English, we cleaned our act. Natural corks have gotten way better. They're close to perfect these days. And the technical corks, depending on what wines you bring into, they work perfectly. And it's still a cork. So it's a natural product. It's very sustainable. There's nothing more sustainable than a cork. There's no other closure out there which comes even close to it. And we know sustainability is a big factor these days. And more and more people are concerned about it. Hey, we're very fortunate that we work with cork. It's a perfect product for the world we're living in.
Yeah, it has been for a long time. Yeah, I think that's interesting because I've heard the analogy made for between like watches, like fine watches and just everyday watches for different types of wine. And I almost view that as like cork. It's like the technical or synthetic corks. You could have just like a cheap digital watch. It'll still do the job for a little period of time. But if you want something that'll work and is handcrafted for years, you go for the higher end watch with a brilliant movement. So I think that's an interesting way of putting it.
Actually, we've done a study, or not we, but an organization has done a study for us many years ago. And they looked at the average selling price of a bottle with a cork and the technical cork versus a screw cap and the synthetic cork. And the average selling price is way higher with a bottle sealed with a cork. So there's a perception out there in the marketplace too that cork equals quality from a consumer perspective. And we get so involved as a winemaker in what we do every day, and we want maybe the best solution for something, but we should never forget who is our end buyer, which is the consumer. And the consumer, by and large, prefers cork.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and then a lot of winemakers also say we'll put sometimes many years into producing a wine, and then if you cheap out or try to go the shorter route at the end, you're basically ruining all the work with the closure. So I completely agree. I think that's fascinating.
Plenty of corks at different lengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Sometimes you have a bottleneck which actually is better suited to a shorter cork. It will do a better job. And I'm not going to go into technicalities now, but the winemakers will very often choose a longer cork. If they know from the functionality, it's probably not as perfect as the shorter one for sealing, but from a customer's perspective, a longer cork equals image, higher quality.
Fascinating.
So,
do you see that in like Burgundy bottles more, where it like sloops out rather than the Bordeaux?
It's out sooner. Because the worst you can have for a cork, that the cork flares out at the bottom.
Huh.
Then they become soft. They're not as,
Expand.
don't have the same pressure against the bottleneck. And then wine can start seeping between glass and cork. And once you get a little bit of seepage, you will get capillary reaction, and eventually it will seep all the way through.
Interesting.
You think this is a bad cork. Actually, it's not a bad cork. It's the wrong cork for the wrong bottle, for the bubble and taste. Obviously, you can have a bad cork and it can seep, and because it has a dry air or wormhole or whatever. But if the cork, let's say the cork is sound, you have a good cork, and the consumer will immediately say, "Hey, this is a terrible cork." It had nothing to do with the cork in itself. It was just the wrong cork. Or even you're familiar with wineries use vacuum when they bottle, and sometimes the vacuum doesn't work properly. So you get positive pressure in the bottle, and you have positive pressure in the bottle. Eventually, either the cork pops or the wine finds a way to seep.
Interesting. Well, we'll have touched on what's on the roadmap for Cork Supply in our 5 question segment, but I wanted to ask, what are you most excited about in the wine world right now? You've been in the industry for so many years. What is that you're seeing right now really exciting you?
Actually, less exciting is the wine consumption is dropping, which is worrying us all. So that's a not so exciting time we are facing. You go through cycles. I've been in this now for 44 years. And I think this is one of the latest cycles. It's probably going to stay with us for a while. Then also with COVID, the demands for wine and spirits just grew drastically. And we all thought this will never end. And then after COVID, things really slowed down and lots of overstocking. So we're dealing with those issues still today. But what excites me is cork is a living product, just like wine. And it's, 500 or 1,000 years old. And there's still things we can do to make a better cork and innovate. And that's exciting. You have a natural product, and you keep on inventing, doing research, doing new things, showing solutions to winemakers. And winemakers, overall, wineries sell something the consumer enjoys. It's not something you need for your day-to-day life. So they're passionate with what they do because they sell something the customer really enjoys. And we end up selling to wineries and to the winemaker. And we also have a natural product, a living product, which is exciting. So we get passionate about it. And we have passionate clients. So that's really an exciting part in our business. It never gets dull. Let's put it this way. And obviously, it's a competitive world out there, and you have to face all these challenges and all the tariffs and what have you. Actually, we just got the great news that supposedly Corks will have no tariffs. They're exempt from tariffs. I believe it when I see it. When I see the first container arrive in California without tariffs, because right now we're paying. But so those are exciting news that Cork is exempt. But and the company is 44 years old. We've been growing for most of the years. And despite the lower consumption, we still see growth for us in the industry. Especially because we can gain more market share. We have lesser competitors than we had 10 years ago. That also helps. And every time you have a crisis, you get the weaker ones, unfortunately, don't continue, and then the other ones get stronger usually. And I think you're going to see this with this cycle as well. And we talked a lot about the New World wine countries, which was really what got me going. And then when we got involved in manufacturing corks, I said, hey, we have the old world to sell corks to, which is huge markets like Spain, Italy, France, Portugal. And we only started in 2005 in Europe. So in Europe, we're still a newcomer. Believe it or not, what took me to go back to the beginning of our conversation, what took me to accomplish in 1 year in California, and with all the experience I gained over the years and our teams, and when we had the factory really, and we really understood manufacturing well, and we said, let's go to the European wineries. What took us 1 year in the States, in 81, in 2005, took us I'd say 4 to 5 years to achieve the same.
Oh,
To break into these old traditional markets, it's very, very, very hard. So thank God in 81, I think I took the right decision. But now we're into all these major European markets, but we still have room to grow. And also then there are new markets, especially on spirits. I think like India will be an interesting market for us in not too long a future. I don't know, but the biggest consumer for whiskey is actually India. Okay.
yeah.
A lot of it is low quality whiskey, but as they develop a middle class with purchasing power, I think we will see more premium whiskies coming up and also at the higher end of the market. And I understand they now eliminated import duties from England to India for premium Scotch. So that will make a big boost. And then you'll have lots of Scotch whiskey being produced in India. So I think for bar top, which are cork, which gets wood top or plastic top, whatever, it's going to be a big market down the road. I think in Asia, we will see more activity. In Japan and Vietnam and other markets, we see, for instance, Brazil has been traditionally a market which imports a lot of wine and produced wines for many years, but never really quality wines, let's put it this way. But as of late, they're actually starting to make some really nice wines. So it's a huge market, Brazil. So there's quite a potential for us, that part of the world. So like I said, with new markets and getting more market share of some of the traditional markets, we see a positive future for us.
Wow. Well, I look forward to see how you guys grow, and I think that's a perfect spot to leave our conversation. Thanks so much for your insight and time today.
You're very welcome. I probably didn't address all the questions you had, but we talked a lot.
All right. That was our interview with Jochen Michalski of Cork Supply. I hope everybody learned a ton about corks and that next time you open a bottle, you will look more closely at every element of that closure. But for now, this is our episode for this week. We will be back with another 5 questions on Friday and another full episode next week. Cheers.